May 9th, 1941. North Atlantic. The water's rough. Steel ships cutting through cold spray. David Edward Balme is a Royal Navy sub-lieutenant, not even 20 years old yet, and he's climbing onto the hull of U-110 while the ocean tries to knock him off. The conning tower opens up like a dark mouth, narrow and sharp, and he heads straight for it. He tells the small team with him, "This is simple physics. Jump, land, slide, grab, move." They go for the higher side to keep it quick. The hull's slippery. The submarine sounds like it's groaning. Balme drops inside. The air smells sour and metallic. Boots hit the metal grates. A petty officer's yelling about charges and time and water. The boat's going down. They're 8 in all, and they know they're racing the sea. Balme moves into the radio room and spots something that looks like a typewriter that ate a safe, still sitting there with a warm desk lamp next to it. He kills the power, unplugs cables, and lifts the whole thing. A seaman starts tearing charts off the walls. Another guy rips open binders that are already falling apart from the damp. A telegraphist knows what matters. The settings, the signal cards, the pages that squeeze a paragraph into a few seconds of burst transmission. Rotors, small metal pieces, numbered, looking like someone's pocket ashtray, clatter into a bag, cold enough to hurt your hands. They grab everything like they're saving a house from fire. Photos, boxes, that small drawer with the important envelopes. One guy starts digging too deep into lockers and Balme shuts him down. No extras, just what's on the list. When the boat shifts and water starts climbing the walls, it's decision time. Check one more locker or get out with what you've got. Balme calls it. Out. Now. They move. On deck, the swell's worse. HMS Bulldog pulls up alongside, and a rescue boat claws toward them. They hand everything up through the hatch, wet glove to wet glove, and throw it all into the whaler. The blanket-wrapped machine actually slides under an oar as they're heading back. When that weight finally hits the bottom of the rescue boat, wrapped in a dark blanket, you can feel it in your chest. Once they're aboard Bulldog, a petty officer lines up the rotors and counts them like change. The telegraphist opens the book with both hands, trying to keep the pages from curling shut. It reeks of oil and damp ink. A few weeks later, things start happening that are tough to explain any other way. Not everywhere, not all the time, but enough to notice. By 1943, the Atlantic changes so fast there's a month the sailors call Black May, a stretch where more U-boats go down than German officers ever thought they'd lose in that shorter time. The whole story comes down to one quote from Balme's report, totally dry. At 12:45 on the 9th of May, "I left Bulldog in charge of a boarding party to board an enemy submarine which had surfaced. The Germans were good. Their procedures were tight, their crews trained, their signals compressed so fast that direction finding couldn't catch up. What got them wasn't sloppy work or stupidity. It was a hole in the hull and one officer who moved faster than the ocean." Think of the cipher like a bike lock that changes every day at midnight. If you can grab that slip of paper that says today's combination starts at 529, suddenly everything else becomes predictable. That signal book and those rotors are that slip of paper. They don't solve it all, but they cut a massive pile of options down to something manageable. They turn brute force searching into smart searching. Once smart searching runs fast enough, intercepted messages turn into routes on a map. 8 men, minutes inside that boat. The payoff doesn't come today, but it comes soon. A bunch of reroutes over the next few weeks that looks less like luck and more like someone reading their opponent's diary. Somewhere, a classroom instructor writes "unbreakable" on the board. Out here in the Atlantic, a wet blanket is hiding a keyboard that says otherwise. This is where it starts. The myth of unbreakable has its first real dent, but the enemy's going to learn from U-110. They're going to tighten things up. That window's closing. If this is going to keep working, if this secret's going to stay useful, somebody's going to have to do this again. Next time the sea will be darker and the cost will be higher. By autumn 1942, the easy answers were gone. The Germans changed how they did things, and it felt like someone had slammed every door shut at once. There used to be little openings, a predictable weather report, a standard phrase that always showed up the same way, but now there was nothing. just a wall. In London, a routing officer was trying to track a convoy across the North Atlantic with a pencil that kept breaking. It was brand new. The map was ancient. He picked up the phone. No ultra, no decoded messages, nothing. The ocean kept its own count in sunken ships. In 2 weeks, more vessels went down than in the entire month before. These men had gotten used to being 1 day ahead of the enemy. Now they were 2 days behind. Escorts were chasing radio signals that just faded away. A captain on a small warship wrote in his log that something had shifted in how the German U-boats were communicating. It was tighter now, more focused. Like a boxer who stops talking and just concentrates on the next round, the choices got harder. Do you delay a convoy for half a day, hoping a code might break? Or do you send it on schedule? A grey-haired officer made the call to send it. 2 days later, a ship in the back got hit with a torpedo, thrown right out of the water like a toy in a bath. The last lifeboat scraped the side of the ship as it went down. Back in the operations room, someone marked another X on the board. You could hear the desperation now in how people talked. Nobody said, "We need to capture another U-boat." They said, "We could use a break," which everyone knew meant we're running blind and we need help. But you couldn't say it out loud because everything was classified. Then a message came through from the Admiralty. "We can't read the code reliably anymore. We need something to work with. We need paper. We need to go out there again and grab it, the way they did before." The numbers told the story. Convoys without air protection lost ships at several times the rate of protected ones. When they had decoded messages, they could reroute ships and cut exposure time in meaningful ways. When the decode stopped coming, losses climbed. The math was brutal. No information meant bleeding out. Having it meant survival. German radio operators had tightened everything up. Shorter messages, stricter rules about handling keys, the whole system locked down. The very system designed to make messages brief and harder to intercept actually made them more patterned. And if you could get the handbook that explained those patterns, you could flip the whole thing around. But nobody had that handbook now. When a phrase like "weather for today" always appeared in the same spot, codebreakers could use that as a starting point. They'd take words they knew had to be in the message and match them against the encoded version to figure out what settings the machine was using. But if the Germans changed that phrase around, moved things, added another rotor, or made operators stop repeating themselves, suddenly you had nothing to grab onto. The machines weren't the bottleneck. The real problem was simpler. You had no way to get started. All this computing power and nothing to anchor it to. The answer wasn't being smarter, it was getting your hands on new material. A captured settings list. A code sheet. Anything that gave you a foothold again. Somewhere in a German bunker underground, a signals officer crossed out a sloppy mistake in a training manual. Somewhere in London, a routing officer erased a line on a map and didn't say a word. The same men who pulled documents and codebooks off a captured U-boat were seeing fewer results come back to their desks. The phone line that had carried one decoded message last month carried nothing this month. In one of the rooms full of machines, a woman in uniform wrote out a guess by hand and then scratched it out. That door just wouldn't open anymore. Mavis Beatty had had that moment, those exact words that cracked open an entire Italian plan and knew what solid ground felt like, but right now, there was no solid ground. Out on a dark ocean somewhere, a kid with numb fingers was about to grab a falling book without knowing it. In the months before that happened, the war at sea was completely lopsided. The escorts were getting better. Radio direction finding was picking up more signals. But without those crucial decoded messages, without knowing where the U-boats were hunting, the Germans still picked too many fights. They still sank too many ships. The numbers weren't moving the way London needed them to. Not yet. It's the kind of night that soaks through you. The HMS Petard is lowering a whaler towards something dark and cylindrical bobbing in the water, a U-boat, stripped of its crew but filling fast with seawater. The plan is already set. They're going in. Leading the way down is Lieutenant Anthony Fasson, compact and calm, his voice steady. Right behind him is able seaman Colin Grazier, young and strong, the kind of sailor who can move quietly through tight spaces. And crouching at the hatch is a teenager named Tommy Brown in a duffel coat, his hands already numb from the spray. His one job, grab what they hand him, and don't let it slip. Fasson disappears down into a hole that reeks of battery acid and diesel. Grazier follows. Inside, the water climbs, first to their knees, then higher. The darkness swallows their lights. They feel their way through the compartments, hunting for what matters. A drawer sticks. A book tears. Pages stick together like wet soap in your hands. They pass something up. Brown pulls it to his chest. Then another bundle. He tucks it under his arm. A third one comes, so now he's pressed back against the hatch opening, holding everything with his hands, waiting for the next piece to land. These papers aren't random. The Wetterkoordschlüssel, the weather code book. The Kurd signal heft, the signal book. These compress enormous meaning into just a few letters. Grid squares, bearings, status updates. Tactical information that normally takes minutes to send, squeezed into seconds. If you know how they work, you can crack open their whole message system. The water shifts like something alive, moving in the dark. The whole boat seems to be settling. Brown yells, "Get out, she's going down." He says it again, louder. Grazier stays for one more second. Fasson stays too. They push up one last dripping bundle, and then the submarine tilts. It's not gradual, it's sudden, final. Brown reaches for a wrist and misses. Two men disappear with the steel. The hatch closes on emptiness. Just bubbles come back up. Brown's still holding the books. A boy with wet papers against his chest, his arms torn up from rope and metal. He scrambles into the whaler, and the weight lands with him. The oars hit the water. The boat pulls away. Months later, the medals arrive. George Cross for Fasson, posthumous. George Cross for Grazier, posthumous. George Medal for Brown. The citations keep it simple. Those signal books change everything. Suddenly, messages that were impossible to read become readable again. Not always, not every day, but enough. Enough that somebody can draw a line on a map and say, "Keep the convoy away from there." Enough that German wolf packs arrive at their coordinates to find nothing waiting. Across 1943, convoy after convoy gets redirected. By May, something shifts. U-boat losses spike, while Allied losses drop. Here's the same basic idea as that bike lock. These signal systems work by taking long reports and squashing them into code groups that take seconds to transmit. The speed keeps enemy radio operators from pinpointing your location. But it costs something. The patterns repeat. Once you have the book, those patterns become a decoder. You match them against actual intercepted messages and run them through the machines. What used to take forever to break suddenly takes a night. The difference between a convoy sailing straight into a trap and one that curves away just in time, the same precision that German naval instructors teach, saying the most in the fewest letters, that same skill becomes a liability when somebody loses your codebook. A German signals officer praises his crew for executing a perfect transmission in seconds. Somewhere else, a woman at a decryption machine smiles because the numbers just jump the way they should. Fasson going down. Grazier staying a moment too long. Brown warning them and holding papers with both hands. The boat pulling away while the hull sinks with two men inside. The actual names of those books. The medals they're given. It all matters. The window it bought. The words it unlocked. But can we read fast enough to save the next convoy before everything changes again? Bletchley Park, 1943. The room flickers, bright spots here, shadows there, warm in all the wrong places. The valve racks glow like a city from above at night. Dorothy Boisson's fighting with a loop of paper tape that doesn't want to cooperate. It wants to kink, twist, anything but behave. Next to her, Elsie watches the counters and the sprockets, biting through paper at their relentless pace. They've got this twin tape holder everyone calls the bedstead because, well, it looks exactly like one. The genius part is you can load the next job while the current one's still running. The sound is somewhere between rain on a tin roof and insects in a jar. Then the jam happens the way it always does, sudden, no warning. The tape edges curl, scrape, tear. The whole machine stutters and dies. For a few seconds the silence is louder than all that clattering. Boisson pinches the torn end, trims it carefully, splices it back together with tape so thin it practically folds in on itself if you breathe on it wrong. She threads it back through so the sprockets catch it, working like she's done this 100 times. Booker checks the counter to see exactly where they were. Boisson nods with her chin, and they start again. The counters roll. Drum roll, then a flat hum. A strip of paper chitters out of the printer. Plain text, nothing if you don't know what you're looking at, everything if you do. Someone tears it off without waiting, without checking. They just know. A runner takes off down the corridor, shoes slapping the floorboards, then out into the cold night that smells like coal smoke. Somewhere else in London, a route on a wall map bends just a little bit because of what that runner's carrying. Dozens of decryptions spread across the year, each one measured in ships that never get torpedoed. Messages that used to take a full day now arrive overnight, sometimes in time to change a sailing order by morning. It's all because of that bedstead. Switching between jobs that used to eat half an hour now takes minutes. One of the operators said it. It was hot in summer and cold in winter, and we didn't mind either when a run worked. The discomfort doesn't matter, the exhaustion doesn't matter. Nothing matters except whether the run worked. There's this background fear they all share, the fear of being the one who breaks a tape and loses a good window. Boisson takes a breath before she restarts the machine. Breaking the German traffic is like conducting an orchestra. Intercepted messages come in on tape, and you have to test them against possible settings, over and over, different combinations, hunting for the pattern. The bedstead lets the next tape hang ready while the current one runs, so you can switch the instant you spot something promising. The counters give you a rough sense of whether you're onto something real, and the operators learn to recognize the rhythm that says, keep going versus you're chasing ghosts. A dozen small tricks shave hours off each job. When the enemy changes keys every single day, shaving hours is the difference between reading the traffic and missing it, between keeping the Atlantic dangerous and turning it around. But the Germans don't give up either. They change their patterns, stop making careless mistakes, keep messages short. This stays a real fight between skilled people on both sides. Machines can extend what humans can do, but they don't replace judgment, nerve, or stubbornness. Dorothy Boisson splices tape under pressure. If that tape breaks, if that splice fails, the window closes. Elsie Booker does her handover with just a hand on the counter and a quiet word. Watch this range first. One sentence that saves time, passes on knowledge, keeps the next person from starting from scratch. A runner practically slides down the hallway with a strip of paper and laughs because he didn't fall and the paper didn't tear. The numbers start telling a story. In the weeks leading up to May, U-boat losses climb while Allied sinkings drop, and you can see the shift happening before you even write it down. When a hunter arrives at a rendezvous and finds only water, that's not just something that didn't happen, that's a life that didn't end. Spring and summer, 1943. A U-boat captain peers through his periscope. Atlantic water, sky, nothing else. He spent months trusting coordinates and timing, following maps that told him exactly where ships would be. But today he surfaces and finds the ocean empty. Worse, he hears something, an engine, maybe two. The water sounds wrong against his hull. A destroyer, possibly close enough to be dangerous. He takes the boat down and starts counting. A distant explosion. Then another. He waits, because waiting is how you survive. But he's not sure anymore that it will work. Somewhere across that same ocean, a convoy is moving slowly through the dark, organized, quiet, deliberately boring. That's exactly the point. The route they're taking isn't the original one. Someone changed it. That simple change, written on a map and passed along, just saved lives. It's the kind of proof that doesn't show up in photographs, but shows up in families that didn't lose anyone. Between late April and late May 1943, 58 Allied ships went down. That's fewer than the month before. But 43 U-boats were sunk and 37 more were damaged. For a few weeks, the Germans were losing submarines faster than many of their officers thought possible in an entire season. The Atlantic stopped being a hunting ground and turned into something you couldn't navigate safely anymore. The Germans had to make a decision. Keep sending boats into convoy lanes where the odds had turned against them, or pull back and try something else? By summer, the answer was clear. Fewer U-boats in the places where convoys actually sailed, more somewhere else where they might still have a chance. It's a retreat you can measure in numbers. The Germans had been confident, so confident they'd put it in their manuals. Keep your radio messages short, stay disciplined, and the enemy can't break your code. If they can't break your code, their ships are sitting ducks. But that assumption had cracked. The other side was reading enough of their messages, often enough, combined with radio direction finding, long-range planes, and small aircraft carriers that packed surprising firepower. Every U-boat that surfaced became a target. A line on a staff map quietly read, "Pull out of the main convoy routes." An entry in a German war diary said simply, "The Atlantic is too hot." It wasn't one thing. Decrypts alone don't win battles. They're just arrows on a map. A radio direction finder picks up a transmission and gives you a bearing. A long-range patrol plane covers the gap. An escort carrier travelling with the convoy brings fighters and bombers where there used to be empty sky. The decrypt tells you where a wolf pack wants to meet. The bearing tells you which area to search. Planes keep U-boats underwater during daylight, slowing them down, blinding them. Destroyers take over at night, when a periscope might otherwise cut a clean line across the water. Each piece held up the others. Lose one and the system still worked. Lose two and it got shaky. Lose three and everything fell apart. That's what happened. Before spring 1943, the Atlantic was killing merchant ships by the dozens every month, while only a handful of U-boats went down. Then the lines crossed. After that, convoys still faced danger, but the odds flipped. A U-boat leaving port was now more likely to be sunk or damaged than to make it through its patrol. A convoy leaving port was more likely to arrive safely. A routing officer saw the message come through, stretched, and drew a new line on his map. A U-boat crew listened to depth charges exploding so fast they blended together. A young woman in a code-breaking room heard a machine go quiet and knew the next few hours mattered. A boy in Newcastle who once carried wet books was now out running errands on a day off. No idea that somewhere a convoy had just passed through waters where a wolf would have been waiting. The hunters found empty ocean. The losses went the other way. Everything changed. The names of everyone who made it possible that week, most of them, stayed quiet. Okay, so we've got the whole picture now. The enemy pulled back. We've covered Black May, that massive coordinated effort, and what happened in the months after. Now we're getting to the final piece. It's about medals, staying quiet, and what silence actually tells you. We're looking at the years from 1941 to the end of the war. Awards that came through without fanfare. Those months right after May when everything kind of settled down again. Families get medals in the mail while planning boards get filed away. Fasson, Grazier and Brown get recognised. Meanwhile, the WRNS operators just go back to their regular shifts like nothing happened. Three things happen as we wrap up. A family gets a medal that doesn't explain much of anything. An operator comes home at dawn after a shift she can't talk about and falls asleep. And a final map shows shipping routes that aren't getting attacked by wolf packs anymore. There's this hallway with a polished floor. A medal sits in a box. They read Tony Fasson's name. He gets the George Cross. His family nods. Then Colin Grazier's name. Another George Cross. The way the citations are written, it's formal, you know? It sounds important without actually telling you anything. It leaves space for your imagination. Maybe you picture a dark hatch, someone shouting a last warning into the wind. In a military town, a train pulls in at some ungodly hour. Dorothy du Boisson gets off with what feels like a headache made of numbers she'll never tell anyone about. She goes to bed in sheets that smell clean and goes right to sleep. Last night worked. The machines click the way they're supposed to when the code key and the encrypted message match up. Somewhere, someone drew a pencil line on a map and then stopped. Dorothy will never see that map. She doesn't need to. Before this all happened, convoys were getting sunk constantly. It felt inevitable. After, the convoys lost fewer ships, but more submarines went down, and that doctrine everyone thought was unbreakable? Suddenly, it had problems nobody could solve. In Black May, those lines crossed, fewer merchant ships lost, dozens of U-boats sunk or damaged. That's the real story, the lines crossing. You keep this secret so it keeps working tomorrow. you don't celebrate today. That's why some of these names are hidden. It's not false modesty. It's how you maintain something that works. The enemy was smart. The ocean doesn't care about anyone. What actually happened was a chain of choices. A young 20-year-old made a boarding call in rough seas because he knew what he was doing. 2 men went down into a dark tube, knowing what water does when it rises. A kid made himself useful. 2 women learned to read a machine's tiny hesitation. And tons of other people, names buried in files somewhere, all worked together to change the Atlantic. Somewhere there's still a chalkboard with unbreakable written on it. It's still annoying to look at. The board is still smooth. The words just not as true as it used to be. A routing officer hovers a pencil over where 2 lines would have met, where a ship would have gone down, and then just lifts it. Doesn't write anything. Goes home quiet. Nobody asks why.